Hi, guys. Welcome back to the Therapy Pages podcast. I am April.
I'm Dory.
Hello, I'm
And
Cynthia.
yes, we are here with Cynthia Thomasset. So, Cynthia, do you want to say anything about yourself?
Hi, everybody. I'm a therapist at Bodhi Counseling with Dory and April, and was happy to be asked to be a guest on their podcast today to discuss Viktor Frankl's important book called Man's Search for Meaning. I'm happy to be here.
Thanks. We are glad that you were here too. It's always fun to have someone new and do something different. So,
Mm-hmm.
so let's get into the book. What did everybody think of Man's Search for Meaning? I know this was a book that I had to read in high school, and then I kind of forgot about until recently when Cynthia kind of suggested it for the podcast. So, what was everyone's thoughts? What were your takeaways from the book?
Yeah, I know the first time I read it, I was just profoundly moved by it. Um, so, and then I put it down. I didn't read it for a number of years, and then read it again, and it just I think it's timeless. I think the lessons in it, and I know Cynthia's going to go a little bit deeper into some of the lessons that are in it and the theories, but to me it real like the title is so fitting. Man's Search for Meaning, like that's it. Like, what is the meaning of life? How do we make sense of our lives? And how did he, with his story? So I feel like it's a book anybody literally could get something out of.
Hmm.
And I had a similar experience having read it in either high school or college. I don't quite remember. And then rereading it because I conducted a support group recently about for people who are suffering and worried about the political climate in the United States. And I just felt like his takeaways in that book really are fitting for people who are scared and wanting to find reasons to be happy and find joy at a time when they're not feeling particularly happy or joyful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seems so apropos, doesn't it, for the times? And I mean, it was written so long ago. I mean, but at such a time of turmoil in the world too, so
Yes, I'm opening the book to see what year the first publishing was. 1959.
hmm
One, two,
Wow. So yeah, a very long time ago, huh?
yeah.
I didn't know it was that long ago for some reason.
And it's had 5 revisions since then. I don't know. I know it's in a lot of
and
languages.
tran translated into over 50 languages.
Yeah,
So,
Wow,
far,
50
far.
languages.
and over, according to my quick search, over 16 million copies sold as of 2022. So I cannot imagine in the past 3 years how many more copies have been sold. So, yeah.
Yeah, he in the um forward of the book, they discuss he wanted to write the book anonymously. He was a psychiatrist who survived the Holocaust. His 24-year-old wife perished, his whole family perished, and people wondered how did some people survive and some people didn't survive. So he looked at the psychological insights this book illustrates what he thinks set some people apart and why some people were able to survive such horror.
hmm Yeah. Yeah. And Cynthia, since you just did this, did it come up about the idea of human dignity and how we maintain that? Like, did that come up in your discussion?
He
Because I
doesn't
think
use he doesn't particularly use the word dignity, but it's about meaning, life meaning, and how do we have it. So for me, the central themes were work, love, and suffering, taking it down
Mm,
to a very, very simple phrase. And with suffering, he comments that all humans suffer. It's unavoidable. We may have third world problem suffering, but there's people that suffer more than us, less than us, but life does not get by scot free without it. And what sets some people apart is their attitude towards the suffering.
so
That
about
And
makes
finding
such
meaning.
Yes, having that makes such sense. Also with Marsha Linehan talking about the difference between pain and suffering too, and saying like that there's pain everywhere. We all experience pain, but we can avoid suffering. And she talks about the way to avoid suffering is through acceptance, radical acceptance. But yeah, interesting that comes up, in DBT skills with Marsha Linehan as well.
Yeah, because he says suffering is unavoidable, but the attitude is a choice. And when everything is taken away from someone, what do we have? When I conducted this support group a few weekends ago, I asked people, who are you? How can you describe yourself if you're not saying that you were a professor or a banker or a mother or a girlfriend or a daughter? Who are we without what we are? Who are we at a soul level? And not one person in the room could articulate who they were, because he describes in the book arriving at the first concentration camp, and people had satchels of belongings or their grandmother's necklace or their wedding ring. Every single thing got taken from you, including your clothing and your shoes,
And his manuscript.
his manuscript that he had to rewrite.
Yeah.
And so who are you when you are literally stripped of every possession and you are standing vulnerably in a camp, a concentration camp, prison, not knowing if you're going to go to the left, which means you are going to be perishing, or if you are going to go to a camp. Who are we? It's a big, huge question, sort of at a soul level. And
yes, some of the quotes that I think you had already said, some of the quotes that I wrote down that I saved. I think you had already said everything can be taken away from a man, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. And that, that's what I think what you just said, basically, that we're faced with these things. What do we do with them? We change our attitude and to be able to live.
Well, and us as therapists, we may all feel as depressed as some of the people we see at different times in our lives. What do we do to adjust our attitudes or our response to suffering or feeling unwell so that we can be well enough to continue to help others? That goes into his concept of life having purpose and meaning. So one way he says that love manifests is through service for others. And that can be something small, taking soup to a sick neighbor, picking one of your last bouquets out of your garden and leaving it on someone's doorstep. Or it can be big things, as therapists or people that are in the caring or helping or healing profession. We are doing that every day. We are helping other people. So for me, that is really the fuel that guides my life, that I'm a helper and a healer. And so helping people, no matter what their job is or situation is, find that meaning is something that I really do as a clinician.
Yeah, and I think finding meaning in even things outside of our job too, because what you said earlier about having all of those things stripped away, as I was reading this, started thinking about, well, what would happen if I couldn't be a therapist anymore, or what will happen maybe at some point, obviously, when I'm going to retire and don't have that identity anymore. And I work with a lot of like even police officers or people in professions that you retire and you're kind of like, well, what's left now? So I think that idea of contributing in some kind of way is so important.
Yeah, and April, you drew I guess a comparison or a parallel with Marsha Linehan's DBT therapy, and I think that's such a key component of her teaching, of her theory also, like contributing, like finding meaning, and I mean, isn't that life worth living? But and I think that's really important in a number of theories, I'm sure, psychological theories or therapy theories, but it's definitely a key component of DBT.
Yeah, that's in the stress tolerance skills,
Yep.
the finding meaning and contributing. Yeah.
Well, because he commented, or a takeaway was that prisoners who could find meaning, whether it was hope or purpose or love, had a greater chance of surviving the concentration camps. And as a doctor, psychiatrists go to medical school, so he was trained medically as well as in the residency as a psychiatrist. He got called to help, and no matter how poorly he felt, he was present for anyone who stood in front of him, because not every Nazi guard or Gestapo was a horrible person. Some were brutal and sadistic, but many were not. And some, they would use creativity, even in the camps, to recite poetry or reading, or someone would sing. And it took them all out of the moment of horror and at least had a couple minutes of reprieve. And the guards would participate in that. The prisoners would participate in that. And he, as a doctor, was trained to be present. And I think that's one reason why he was able to survive.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. The amount of times that he was so close to being killed throughout this book, it was just crazy. And it's so amazing that he was able to not, and that you're right, he was able to get himself out of so many of those situations by creating that purpose for himself and helping in so many ways.
I don't know.
Yeah, another quote. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Another quote that I wrote, in some ways, suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds a meaning, such as meaning of a sacrifice. So I think that kind of goes to what you were just saying. That was, I think, towards the end of the book.
Yeah. Well, and one part that stuck out for me, even when I read it as an 18 or 20-year-old, was when he was out digging frozen dirt or whatever they had them doing as prisoners. It was, I believe, his wife's birthday, and she was 24, and he was thinking of her deeply, infusing himself with the love that they shared. And he saw a small bird land right at that moment, and seeing, a beautiful animal transported him, and he was able to keep the love as a sustaining force. Thinking of loved ones. I know I loved my grandparents, and I even lived with them junior year of high school. And I felt so safe sitting at the table with my grandfather making me breakfast, and my grandmother was an artist. I just loved being there. And sometimes I close my eyes and breathe and remember that feeling of safety. And that's something that we can recall, because love doesn't die.
That, yeah, you reminded me of that in the book, and that really touched me, that he was able to, because at that point, did he know that she had died?
No.
At that point, I can't remember.
Mm-mm.
But
Yeah, no, he
he,
didn't.
he had some suspicions, like he didn't know where he was, but even when he found out that, she had died, had been killed, he still was able to not bypass, but able to harness that love, not bypass the grief, because he certainly felt that, but he was able to harness the love, and that was strength for him. And to really be able to, it was almost like unadulterated by the horrors of what happened, and
Yep.
that pure love that he had for her was, and his loved ones, he was able to see that. And I think that is such a lesson, definitely for me, but also, I think that we can carry on for our clients, and that, people can maybe take out of this book also.
Yeah, that love can be deeper than a physical presence with somebody. And he also had a phrase in the book, or a thought of something called tragic optimism, that even with tragedy, we can say yes by finding meaning in our suffering, or once again, going back to the love that's manifested through service for others.
Yeah.
And he also observed that people who lost their will to live or any vision for the future often just declined psychologically and physically. And so how were some people able to hold on to that? They literally were getting 3 ounces of bread and broth once a day, and doing hours of physical labor in freezing cold weather, sometimes always with shoes that didn't fit, because the guards stole the good shoes. So we don't even stand up to change our television. Hey, most of us pay someone else to cut our grass. That kind of physical labor on no food.
And when they would give their food away to one of the sick ones, like the 3 ounces of bread, or the, the salty water that they had that, was passed off as broth, they would give it to others who were suffering, I guess, more, or, that was just fascinating too.
It was, and that they, despite if somebody looked weak, they knew what their fate was going to be. If you were limping, if you were not standing tall, you were going to go to the showers, which were the gas chambers. And so sometimes they would support each other that way by, like you said, giving away their meager food so that somebody else could be strong enough to survive. And that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, so it is something for everyone who might be listening to this to think about is anything in your life, not necessarily your job or how you make money, which obviously we all have to do unless we're lucky enough to have a trust fund. We have to work. And or if you don't love your job, what does give your life meaning and purpose? What is aligned with something greater than ourselves? Some people find it in a church community. Some people are community activists. Some people do a lot of service to others or volunteerism. It can be big or small, what we do.
Yeah, and so many clients I know are asking me and friends, family, like what can I do with these feelings of hopelessness at times? And I think that really is the answer, is no matter what you do, finding some sense of purpose, something that does give your life meaning. Even like Cynthia, like you said, it can be very small. It doesn't have to be a big thing or changing your career or your job. It can start with something very small. But yes, finding that small thing is so important.
Yeah. Another sentence which kind of makes me think about what's happening in the United States right now. One sentence that really stuck out to me is an abnormal reaction to an abnormal situation is normal behavior.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
So those of us who are reacting to things, events that are going on that feel bigger than us and out of our control, that is a very normal reaction to abnormal behavior. From my perspective, what's happening is abnormal behavior. I'm not speaking for everyone.
Yeah, and just validating that, it's so helpful. Just being able to acknowledge and validate like that feeling. Yes, it is normal. It makes sense to be having that feeling.
Yeah. Frankl also then created a school of psychotherapy called logotherapy, and the meaning of that is therapy through meaning. And the core principles tie to the principles that came out of the book, the meaning, will to meaning. Freud said the primary pleasure drive or the primary driving force of life was pleasure, or Adler said it was power. He believes that humans search for meaning in life. And I see a lot of people who also are retirement age. And like somebody said earlier, April, you said when a police officer retires, who are we when we take away that identity that's been 40 or 50 hours of our week for years? I love working with retired people to help them find meaning in the next chapter. Because too many of us make work our whole life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So
he also
important.
talked about the, freedom of will, meaning like, we can choose our attitudes about what our circumstances. I think that's an important component too, and that's, I guess, the sentence that relates to the sentence that I said. But yeah, I mean, we can, we're fit, and April, to what you said about radical acceptance, right? I mean, I think that kind of goes to that too. Like, we're put in these circumstances, and it is up to us how we deal with them. We can just cower and sit and do nothing. We can, yell and scream. We cannot accept. We can, just do, things that might not be helpful. We can choose to, all right, let me really take a look at this, and how can I live my true self and life, and, find meaning in this, in the choices that I make under these difficult circumstances. So
There's so many things. I see people that retire and all of a sudden have strange little health issues cropping up. And they say to me, my gosh, I'm 65 years old. I've worked however many years, and now I have this or this. And the people who have a good attitude and work through it do better. But I do see people that become depressed and inert and don't work towards wellness or do the things we know we all have to do. I sort of picture a bubble around someone, and I sometimes do this sort of meditation or creative visualization with people. I ask them to put a bubble around them, and the only things that are allowed to swirl around them in the bubble are things that are good for them. And I ask them to think of this once a day. Did they drink water? Did they sleep enough? Are they eating healthy food? Did they get out and walk around and breathe the air, get in the sunshine? Basic self-care things that make us happy, stable people.
Yeah, great point. And I think, a part of that too is, also, yes, finding those things that you enjoy doing, those things that make you happy and give you some sense of purpose. But I mean, you're right. I was thinking about the elderly people too, or even people retirement age, even younger, who just have a chronic illness or chronic pain, and how hard that is to cope with.
Yeah, it's so hard. I even there's therapists who have chronic pain who have to sometimes cancel with clients if they're having a flare up of whatever, fibromyalgia or chronic pain or exhaustion, and the shame and guilt they feel if they have to reschedule clients. But the beauty in courage and dignity is honoring themselves and knowing that they know what they have to do to be well. Everyone has to do that. We have to, in some, it's not selfish to put ourselves first so that we can be healthy as we walk through life for the other people around us, whether it's personally or professionally, the people around us.
Yeah, great point.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. And, the central message is life having meaning under all circumstances, even suffering. What you said, what we all said about attitude and finding meaning in everything. And it can come from so many different ways: love, work, or how we bear suffering.
Yeah. And that we have choices. Like we do have a choice, we have a
Yes.
choice to turn our mind that way.
Yeah.
Not that it's easy. So I don't want to, make it sound, that simple, but I mean, we can turn things around and look for the meaning. I guess that's where, the cliche silver line, where's the silver lining, or, whatever. But, yeah, I mean, I think we can try to find meaning in even the most dire circumstances.
What do you think about the theme of spirituality through the book, that he found that people that had some sort of spiritual inner life fared better?
Yeah, I was going to bring that up as well. That part was really interesting to me as well. And I think that sometimes having any kind of spiritual beliefs, and that could be literally anything. It doesn't have to be one specific thing, but I do feel that having some spiritual beliefs, a belief in something, anything, can be really helpful in coping with, especially feelings of despair and hopelessness.
Yeah, believing something bigger than ourselves, that there is some force for good in the world. And I even say to people, make your last thought when you turn out your light and you're about to drift off to sleep, where you list 5 or 10 things you're grateful for, because you're flooding yourself with good feelings. I'm grateful for my bed every night when I get into it, my stack of books, that I take a nighttime walk with my dog through the neighborhood, and soon there'll be Christmas lights up. I love walking in the cold nights with Christmas lights. So enjoying small micro moments that we might take for granted as we go through our days, really paying attention to when we feel good or neutral, because humans are experts at paying attention to when we feel terrible.
Yep. Yeah, and that's bringing mindfulness in, which I think we all work with ourselves and with our with our clients, and we try to teach mindfulness. But that's so powerful. I wanted to say something else about spirituality. I think that when I talk about this book to people with with a trauma history, or going through difficult things, the difference between having a diagnosable trauma response, like PTSD or something, like, so a lot of these people went through very terrible things, and finding meaning really helps to heal the mind, the brain, the spirit, so that you don't have those symptoms of PTSD. Like you can go through very traumatic events and not have that. So sometimes people will say, well, this was horrible, I'm going to be traumatized. First of all, that word alone is holds a lot of charge for people and is
Yeah.
overused.
Mhm.
But I think when we find meaning, it really does. It almost defuses the trauma. It really, because it just, we have a lesson. It helped us become who we are. And again, not to minimize anybody's experience, but I think the research would support that when you have meaning, and whether it's spirituality, whatever the meaning is, whether it's, like in he did talk about spirituality and how a lot of the religious people, whether they were the Jews, the Christians, the Muslims, whatever, they did fare better. And I think that's supported through research that you do, and you have less, I think diagnostic criteria of PTSD.
Yeah, very, very true. Good point. Yeah.
Yeah, and we talked about his connection with his wife, and it was very spiritual. I mean, she wasn't there, and we later, learned that she had died. But I think that connection was so important, that spiritual connection that he had with her, was so important to him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and his work is important. Before this podcast, Dory mentioned it's so strange that we really didn't we weren't taught about logotherapy, and it makes me want to learn more because these principles are so important in the face of suffering. And clients, clients don't come to us to talk about everything that's great in their lives. They come to us with issues and problems. But sometimes somebody will say something about an altercation that was 7 minutes of their day. And of course, I listen with empathy. We talk about how to manage their feelings of stress or anger. But I also say, tell me about the rest of the day. Do you love coffee? I'm so happy when I pour my first cup of coffee and I sit in the corner of my sofa and my little dog sits on my lap. I breathe it in and I pet him, and I'm just grateful for a safe home. And I think flooding ourselves with that gratitude for what is right and not always focusing on the imperfections is a very important tool for getting through life more successfully.
Yeah, and he certainly showed that throughout the book.
Yeah, so many times. Yeah, it was amazing how many times he was still able to talk about, oh, but this good thing happened after, he's just in this awful, horrible situation.
Yeah. He a sort of existential term that came out of his logotherapy was something called Sunday neurosis. And I kind of laughed out loud because it says depression that arises when people confront the emptiness of their lives outside of work. Well, for me, it's more my Sunday neurosis is that I didn't do my notes from the week before. So I ruin every Sunday by having to work for 6 hours. But that is within my control, right?
Yes. Yeah.
But I did kind of
That's
relate
funny.
to that. And he also said the term existential vacuum, that if people feel empty or bored or purposeless, which is common in modern life. Our phones are lovely, but sometimes I fantasize about running over my iPhone in my driveway and getting a flip phone from Best Buy, because we all know we're addicted, and it's decreasing face-to-face time, or decreasing picking up the phone to speak to someone, or doing art. And this is a whole nother topic, but I feel meaning is decreasing in many of our lives because of phones, and that we need to battle that to be present for ourselves and others, to find this purpose more effectively.
Yeah. And actually, that's a good segue to April and I were talking about another, while it's not necessarily book related, but a podcast of, the dangers of whether it's social media or, tech or chat GPT, or, like the how that, can really be damaging.
Yes, it can. So much different problems than the 30s or 40s with technology. And I mean, how far we've come in that time period. I mean, there's many people still alive from that time period. It's crazy, the technological advances, and it's a blessing, but also a curse that we have to be mindful of. So,
yeah.
Yeah, I was just looking it up because I didn't know. So he passed away in September of '97.
Okay.
Mm,
Yeah. He's an important person. And if
Very
anybody's
much.
interested in this book, somebody else who wrote an account is Elie Wiesel, who survived. And
oh
he wrote
yes,
2 short books
yes.
called Night and Dawn, I think.
There's
And
three.
three. And
Yeah.
I actually got to hear him speak when he at a college in
Oh.
Philadelphia years ago. And if anybody's interested in finding meaning in a life that in a world
Hmm.
that feels chaotic, reading these books could be a very good thing to do.
And it's coincidence that they're both Holocaust, but I mean, but they are, but they both, yeah, very, very um, deep meaning. I guess,
Yes.
in modern day, I guess that's one of the most blatant signs of, suffering and what's the term? Like just horrendous, horrible abuse of power and of people, that
Well, I saw a video yesterday of parents being pulled out of a car by federal agents in line to pick up kids from an elementary school.
mm,
And it literally makes me draw parallels to how people were treated during this period of this book that we just reread.
yeah, yeah,
And some people think that I'm exaggerating or hysterical or catastrophizing, but I'm not. This is the reality,
right.
and it is traumatizing for
Hmm.
kids that were born here and have lived here their whole lives. And I
Yeah.
can't help but draw parallels in my own mind.
Yeah, and I think, knowing that too, that means a lot more people are going to be seeking out therapy and wanting to
Yes.
know how to cope with all of these awful things that are happening. So that's, I think, at least in my mind, I'm trying to have a focus on after reading this book is, bringing this to my clients too, and being able to have a focus on this is where do you find that meaning and making sure to obviously not give clients meaning necessarily, encouraging them to figure out what that feels like and looks like for them.
Yes.
Well, because
Yeah.
he said the meaning of life, it's discovered. We can't invent it. We have to
Mm,
Right.
discover it. And that's an
Hmm.
interesting difference to think about.
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, I don't know either of your origin stories or what led either of you to become clinically licensed social workers. I'm a licensed professional counselor, and I did not become so until age 58, 2 years ago. But I discovered how important it was to me that I
Mm,
wanted to work for myself at age 60. And that gave my life and all of my experiences for 4 decades just the ultimate purpose that I'm
hmm.
working with myself gratefully with amazing clinicians like you and Tim and our other colleagues, and just finding that purpose. And I wish that for everyone I know, whether it's big or small, because it can be big and small.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, I do feel grateful to be in this work and to have found it, and
Why
yeah,
did
gratitude every day.
can I ask what? So for me, I grew up in a home that involved domestic violence and alcoholism, and it as an undergraduate at 18, I didn't study psychology, which I have regrets about. And it really wasn't until my late 20s that I thought I'm going to get a master's degree in counseling psychology. So for me, it arose from the suffering that I encountered and what I saw that it did to my family and my world. That was the impetus to become a
Hmm.
helper. And I'm
Hmm.
curious if you two want to share anything about what drove you to do this.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think not necessarily what drove me, but I always laugh because I think, Cynthia, you also started school, sorry, as a communications major. So that's what
Yes.
my major was, which is
Oh my
funny.
goodness. Okay.
Yeah, so I went to school as a communications major, and I was having a hard time being invested. I was it was interesting to me, but I didn't have the passion for it. And then took a social work class, and I was also really helping people a lot and doing other things, and in other ways. And I also in third grade took one of those career quizzes, and it told me I should be a social worker, which is
Oh
so
my
funny
Oh my
goodness.
because at the
God.
time I didn't want to do that, but I will
Mhm.
always remember that. But anyway, yeah. So
Yeah.
after I took
Yeah.
my first social policy class, I was like, this is amazing, and I was actually really interested in social policy and wanted to get into that. I still do. I still have a
Hmm.
major interest in that, but I just think it's funny that you and I both started as communications
I
majors.
had no idea
Yeah.
about that
That's
fact. Very,
funny.
very
Yeah,
cool. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
I started my original college pursuit was early childhood ed. Although, as a child of divorce, when I was about, I can't remember how old I was, my brother was driving me home from a visit at my dad's house back to my mom's house. And he talked about what do I want to, he's 7 years older than me. And he said, what do I want to do when I get older? And I said, I want to be a child therapist. So that
Oh,
was kind of funny,
oh,
but
oh.
took a roundabout route. My undergrad is psychology. I didn't know what social work was actually until I got a scholarship to get an MSW, which I did. And I'm very happy I did because I learned so much more about it. And so I think I always knew I would end up here. I took a roundabout way.
that's nice. Well, I think there's a lot of different helpers and healers in our community, and it can come from a lot of different
Hmm.
ways. And I do think there's an uprising right now that I'm seeing of people that are going to bring light to what does feel like a dark situation. And I am personally just so grateful to be in that camp of,
Hmm.
you
Hmm.
know, the dreamers and the people who want to make sure others are okay.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So, what did we all think about the book as far as
Well,
if you want to give it a rating, and if you
Yeah.
think that you will use this with clients, or if you think it will be
Yeah.
helpful for people to read it? What are your thoughts?
I bought a few copies and I'm going to share it. I'm going to be careful about who I share it with because it is heavy duty content.
Uh-huh.
The description of being in a concentration camp.
Hmm.
If somebody's feeling particularly depressed or weak or vulnerable, it might not be the best read, but I certainly am
Hmm.
already talking about the principles. I give it like a 12 out of a 10. I think it's
I
one of
know,
the
right?
important
Yeah.
books I've ever read in my life, but I will consider where my clients are before I recommend reading it and really just use the takeaways about courage and dignity and how we react to suffering and what gives people's lives meaning. That's the most important thing that I'll use with my clients.
I agree. Yeah, I agree with you, Cynthia. I give it a higher than 10 for sure. I think
Mhm.
it's very meaningful. I think the lessons are good for anybody. And if not recommending the book, then I absolutely use the principles and we'll say where they came from. I'll reference, and I have, for the
Mhm.
past 20, 6 years of therapy. I have recommended, the book. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely also higher. Probably yeah, 11 out of 10. Sounds good. But
Yeah.
one of my favorite quotes was when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. And
Yes.
Mhm.
I just think that that's
Mhm.
so important and could be in any situation. I feel like I find myself saying that so often. We can't change other people. So what can we do?
Yeah.
Make changes that you are able to implement. So I just think that's so important. And yeah, it was hard to read in the beginning of the book. As you guys know, it was rough. Um,
Yeah.
but at the end, it makes it so much worth it. And just the takeaways from the book. So I agree, something I wouldn't recommend it to everyone.
Yeah.
But if
Yeah.
you are interested in learning more about how do you find meaning and purpose, absolutely
Hmm.
recommend.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
And it's a short book. It is not very
Yeah,
long, but boy, that it's power packed. I
It
mean, it
is. It is.
is.
yeah,
And he really writes it in such detail that you can visualize what's going on. So I mean,
Yeah.
I have that kind of visual imagination when I'm reading. And
Hmm.
I was not reading the book before bed. I kind of read it during the day because I didn't feel that I
Hmm.
could handle the emotional impact as my nighttime reading. But
Yeah.
I'm very thankful to have revisited it and been invited to talk on your podcast today.
Thank you. And I
yeah, of
will
course.
say one other thing about I listened to it this time on
Hmm.
Audible and it was very good. So,
Mhm.
yeah, this is the first time I listened to it.
Nice.
Yeah, it's always a little bit of a different perspective reading and
Mm.
listening, which is interesting.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks so much, Cynthia. I'm so glad that you're here, and please join us going forward. So we are going to be doing the next podcast on Atlas of the Heart by Brene Brown. So Cynthia, you are more than welcome to join us. Chelsea Harris is going to join us, and if you are a therapist and you want to join us, please just reach out to us.
Yep.
We're going to do that, and we're also going to record a podcast just talking about more about Dory and I and why we started this podcast, and just talking about therapy books in general. So,
Well, terrific. Thanks so much, ladies.
Yep. Thank you.
all right, bye everybody. See you guys soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.